After a row at my mother-in-law's, my husband dropped me off on a deserted nighttime highway and drove off. I stood there, shivering in the pouring rain, when a long limousine pulled up next to me. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, handed me an umbrella, and calmly said, "Let's go, Natasha. Play my wife today, and I'll help you get revenge on your husband in a way he can't even imagine." Hello, dear viewers of the Life and History channel. Before we begin our story today, please let me know in the comments where you watch our episodes from. Thank you for joining us. We wish you a pleasant experience listening to this true life story. Natasha sat clutching the armrests of the old chair by the window, staring into the gray darkness beyond the glass. Her mother-in-law's house always seemed like a suffocating cage to her. Stuffy rooms filled with antiques exuded the smell of dust and the shattered hopes of others. This evening promised to be especially difficult and drawn out from the very beginning. They had come here for a family dinner, solely at Sergei's insistence. The entire journey, he repeated the same tired mantra. "Family is the most important thing, Natasha. A mother should see her grandson, and we should show that everything is fine." But Natasha understood the true value of these beautiful words all too well. For Sergei, family had long since become a convenient facade behind which he concealed his thirst for total control. This was especially acute now, when the cracks in their marriage had widened to gaping chasms and mutual resentments resembled unhealed wounds. The scandal flared suddenly like dry grass tossed by a match, without warning or apparent cause. It all began with a seemingly innocent remark from her mother-in-law, uttered in that same sickeningly sweet tone that made Natasha's teeth ache. "Natasha, my dear, you're showing no mercy again. You're at work from morning until night, and you've completely forgotten about home. A man needs a well-groomed wife, not this eternal fatigue of yours." Natasha tried to smooth things over, smiled wearily, and laughed it off. "Maria Ivanovna, I'm trying to make sure we have everything we need. Work is also for the family." But Sergei, sitting across from her, instantly flushed, as if he'd been waiting for a pretext. "Are you at it again? Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I don't see how you smile and make eyes at your colleagues? Do you even think about the child sometimes? Or do you just not care anymore?" Natasha froze. This was his favorite tactic, blackmailing him with their son. Little Misha, their 5-year-old son, was currently sleeping at home, and Sergei knew how to use him as a weapon. "If you ever dare leave," he hissed in her ear as she packed her things yet again, "I'll take Misha, and believe me, the courts always side with the father who has a business, connections, and a normal job. And who are you, a working mother with a ton of loans? Who needs you?" Her mother-in-law, Maria Ivanovna, immediately rushed to add fuel to the fire, as she always did. "Sergei is absolutely right, Natasha. In our time, women knew their place. Home, children, husband, that's what matters. And all these careers of yours, they only cause stress and broken families." Tears were already stinging her eyes, her throat constricting. Natasha stood up abruptly, her chair creaking on the old parquet floor. "I work because someone has to pay the bills, while you, Sergei, squander your last money on your business friends and endless business dinners. Your vaunted business hasn't brought in a single decent kopeck for 3 years now, only debts and new promises." This was a mistake. Sergei's face turned purple. He jumped up, grabbed her wrist with such force that red marks from his fingers immediately appeared on her skin and practically dragged her from the room under the stunned gaze of her relatives. "We're leaving right now," he barked, causing the glass pendants on the chandelier to jingle. A heavy, viscous, almost tangible silence reigned in the car. A cold autumn rain poured outside, lashing the glass in furious streams. Sergei drove along the deserted night highway, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles cracked. His knuckles turned white with tension. "You humiliated me in front of my whole family, in front of my mother. You're nothing without me, understand? Absolutely nothing. Without me, you're nothing. And you'll never see Misha again. Never." Natasha was silent, staring into the darkness. Her heart pounded with fear. How many times had she endured this? How many times had she forgiven his betrayal, his infidelities, which he didn't even try to hide, his control over his finances, his threats? But today, something broke inside. She turned her head to her husband and said very quietly, almost a whisper, but every word was clear, "Stop the car. I'm not going any further with you." Sergei slammed on the brakes. The car's tires screeched and stopped across the wet road. He turned to face her. His eyes blazed with anger and a kind of painful triumph. "Get out. Go on foot. We'll see how you, so independent, get to the city without money. We'll see how you sing then." The passenger door swung open. Natasha stepped out into the icy downpour. The car screeched and took off, leaving her alone in the middle of a black, rain-slicked ribbon of asphalt in the pitch-black night, under a merciless, cold rain. The chill penetrated to the bone. The rain poured down in buckets, water streaming down her face, mixing with tears. Natasha hugged herself, but it was no use. The wind whipped her cheeks, and there was not a soul around. Only the hiss of the tires of the rare cars rushing past. She walked forward, not knowing where. Her feet, in high-heeled shoes, slipped through the puddles. Every step was painful. What have I done? How will I get back to Misha? Her thoughts swirled. Fear gripped her throat. What if they don't pick me up? What if Sergei is right and I really am nothing without him? Confusion washed over her in waves. Where to go? Call her friends. But her phone had died back home. And the money? Sergei had controlled all the cards and had taken them. Hopelessness weighed down like a heavy stone. Natasha imagined her son sleeping in a warm bed, and her heart broke. He's using Misha to keep me. A traitor. But how can I leave? He has everything. A house, a car, a job, and all I have is debt and fatigue. She stopped, leaning against a wet post. A shudder ran through her body, her teeth chattering. No one will help. I'm alone. At that moment, headlights illuminated the highway. The car approached slowly, unlike the others. It was an unusual sedan, a long black limousine that retained its shine even in the rain. The limousine braked smoothly a few meters from Natasha. The tires squealed softly on the wet asphalt. The back door opened with a soft click. A man emerged, tall, wearing a perfectly fitting dark blue suit that looked completely dry despite the rain. In his left hand, he held a large black umbrella with a wooden handle. He stepped forward and stopped a step away from her, paying not the slightest attention to the puddles that glistened beneath his mirror-polished shoes. "Natasha, I have a very specific proposition for you. Come with me right now. Play my wife tonight, just for one evening. And in exchange, I'll help you take revenge on your husband in a way he couldn't even imagine in his worst nightmares." Natasha froze, not believing her ears. Who was he? How did he know her name? The rain pounded the umbrella he held out over her. Fear mingled with curiosity. It was a turning point from complete helplessness to something unknown, yet promising hope. She hesitated, but the cold and despair pushed her. "Who are you?" The man smiled at the corner of his mouth. "Call me Alex, and believe me, this offer could change your life." Natasha stood there, unable to move. The rain poured down her hair in heavy streams. Her dress clung to her body, and her shoes were soaked through. The cold had penetrated not only her skin, but her bones, her very heart. And this man, Alex, looked at her calmly, as if they had met not on an empty night highway, but in some expensive restaurant over a glass of wine. "How do you know my name?" Her voice trembled, and she hated herself for this weakness. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether to answer. "I know many things, Natasha," he replied in the same even, deep voice, "including the fact that your husband is now rushing into your house, all pleased with himself, confident that he has finally put you in your place. And I also know that you have a 5-year-old son, whom he uses as the most reliable leash to keep you close. The words hit harder than a slap. Natasha involuntarily took a step back. Were you following us? No, I'm just watching certain people. Sergei Kovalev had been on my list for months. His affairs, his connections, his methods. You ended up in the picture by accident. A side effect. Alex stepped forward, holding the umbrella so the rain wouldn't hit her. He smelled of expensive cologne, leather, and something else. Power, probably. It wasn't a scent you could buy in a store. I don't get into strangers' cars, she said, though her teeth were chattering so loudly the words came out. Do you have a choice? He asked quietly. Another 10. 12 minutes max in this freezing rain and your body will give out. Hypothermia will set in quickly. First, the shaking will become uncontrollable, then confusion, then fainting, and then it will all depend on who drives by next. Not all trucks stop for good reasons, Natasha, and not all drivers are people with principles. He wasn't threatening. He was stating a fact, and that was more frightening than any threat. Natasha looked at the black limousine, the tinted windows, the low hum of the engine, the open back door from which a warm golden light poured. It looked like a trap, and at the same time, like salvation. What do you mean, play your wife? She asked, hugging herself tighter. Exactly what you heard. I have a very important meeting scheduled for tonight, not just any dinner, one where every guest is either a threat or an opportunity. I need a woman by my side, not just a pretty doll, but smart and with stamina. Someone who can take a punch, read people, and not get lost in a difficult situation. The one who, he paused again, choosing his words, won't ask unnecessary questions until I myself deem it necessary to give answers. And what in return? I'll help you take your son, legally, safely, and forever, cut off Sergei from the opportunity to blackmail you with him, plus a financial foundation so that you can get back on your feet. This is not charity, but a deal. Natasha felt something snap inside. A deal. The word sounded dirty, but at the same time, it sounded like a way out. I'm not a prostitute, she said through clenched teeth. Alex wasn't offended. On the contrary, the corners of his lips twitched in a barely noticeable smile. I'm not asking you about this, he answered calmly. I need an illusion. One evening, one carefully rehearsed performance. No touching without your explicit consent. No obligations after the clock strikes midnight. Just a role well played. The rain intensified. The wind threw a whole handful of icy drops into her face. Natasha shuddered all over. If I agree, what do I have to do right now? Get in the car, warm up. Then we'll go to my place. It's not far. Just half an hour on the night highway. There you'll change, freshen up, and then we'll go to the meeting. Then, just listen to me carefully and do as I say, exactly until the moment we finish. Not one step more. She looked into his eyes. There was neither pity nor lust in them, only cold calculation and something else, interest, passion. She couldn't make it out. And if I refuse, then I'll leave, and you'll stay here, alone in the rain with a dead phone, no money, no clear plan for how to live. He wasn't threatening. He was simply showing her reality. And this reality was unbearable. Natasha took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet asphalt, gasoline, and her own fear. Okay, she whispered, but if you deceive me, I don't deceive those I make deals with, he replied calmly. It's bad business. He extended his hand not to take her elbow, but simply to help her up the wet steps of the limousine. Natasha looked at that hand for a second, then another, then placed her icy palm in it. It was warm inside, almost unbearably warm after standing in the rain for so long. Leather seats, soft lighting, the scent of expensive wood and citrus. On the seat next to him lay a tall thermos and a cup. Alex sat down opposite. The door closed with a soft, quiet click. The car pulled away. Drink your tea while it's hot, he said, nodding toward the thermos. We'll be there in 20 to 25 minutes. You'll have plenty of time to get ready. Dresses, underwear, shoes, everything's already prepared. Everything's the right size." Natasha took the cup in both hands. The warmth burned her fingers. She took a sip. Black tea with bergamot and a slight bitterness. The most delicious tea she'd ever had. "Who are you, really?" she asked quietly. Alex looked out the window at the blurry lights of the highway. "A man who doesn't like it when someone uses children as weapons and who really doesn't like your husband. You'll find out the rest later." He turned to her. "Now, Natasha, smile, because in an hour you're going to look like the happiest wife in the world." She barely remembered the drive to Alex's mansion. Outside the windows was pitch-black darkness, only occasionally broken by flashes of streetlights and the distant lights of the city. When the car finally stopped, Natasha felt her heart begin to pound again. The bathroom in the mansion turned out to be the size of an entire walk-in closet in an ordinary apartment. A wall-sized mirror reflected her pale, exhausted face. A soft, warm light poured in from above. The air was filled with the light scent of sandalwood and something floral. Natasha closed the door behind her and leaned her back against it, feeling the trembling finally subside, not from the cold, but from the fact that everything was happening too quickly, too unexpectedly, too unreal. Natasha slowly opened the large white box containing the black satin ribbon she'd found on a chair in the bathroom. The dress lay inside, neatly folded, as if alive. It was a dark emerald, almost black in the dim light, with a rich green hue that shifted depending on the angle of the light, sometimes fading into a deep forest gloom, sometimes blazing with a cool, precious glow. The fabric was weightless, flowing between her fingers like the finest liquid silk, cool and soft at the same time. Nearby, on a separate velvet cushion, lay lingerie of the same emerald color, a set of the finest French lace and silk, without a single unnecessary detail. The shoes were black, patent leather, with incredibly thin 12-centimeter Louboutin heels, and a red sole that flashed only when she stepped. A small, palm-sized clutch of soft calfskin folded over her shoulders, with a single zipper. Natasha slowly raised her eyes to the wall-sized mirror. The reflection showed her a woman she almost didn't recognize. Skin pale to the point of bluish hue, eyelids reddened from tears, and the cold, wet strands of hair clinging to her neck and cheeks like black snakes. Her lips trembled, her eyes wide and frightened. She looked exactly as she felt inside, like someone who'd just been tossed out of her own life onto the side of a late-night highway, like unwanted trash. And yet she reached out and picked up her makeup bag, black leather with a gold zipper. She opened it. Everything inside was from the finest brands: Charlotte Tilbury foundation, Tom Ford eyeshadow, Dior mascara, all laid out neatly, as if someone had carefully selected them for her hand. As she applied the foundation with even, almost mechanical movements, her thoughts raced like trapped birds in a cage. Who is he really? Why me? A coincidence? Or have I long been in someone's sights? What if this is a trap? What if he's worse than Sergei, more cunning, more dangerous, with even greater potential to hurt? Panic washed over her in waves, tightening her throat and making her hands shake so much that her mascara went on unevenly. But every time she wanted to drop everything and run, she remembered her son, and it instantly brought her back to earth. Because living under constant blackmail under the threat of losing her son couldn't be worse. She finished in 18 minutes. When Natasha emerged from the bathroom, already in her dress, Alex stood by the living room window looking out at the city at night. He turned slowly. His gaze swept her up and down, leisurely, appraisingly. He nodded with satisfaction, briefly, businesslike. "Excellent," he said. "You look irresistible, just the way it should be. We're leaving in 3 minutes." Soon the limousine was once again gliding silently through the night streets of Moscow. The streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt in golden streaks. Natasha sat across from Alex, feeling the cool fabric of her dress hug her skin. She had never worn anything like it, never felt so naked and yet so protected. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly but firmly. Alex leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. "A private dinner in a mansion on Rubliovka. 20 people. Half of them are people who decide who will own entire industries tomorrow. The other half are those who want to decide it for them." "I have to pretend to be your wife." "Yes. We've been married for 3 years. We met in London. We don't have children. You're involved in contemporary art and charity work. You're smart, a little cold, very beautiful, and you never raise your voice, even when you're angry." Natasha smiled for the first time all evening. "So I'm supposed to be your opposite." "Exactly." He handed her a thin folder, a brief legend, names, dates, places. "Read and remember. There will be no time for questions." She opened it. Everything was written out clearly, like a script. Even her wife's favorite perfume, even the way she adjusted her hair when she was nervous, with 2 fingers of her left hand. Everything was thought out. "Do you always prepare for kings like this?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the text. "Only when the stakes are higher than money." The car slowed. Ahead, the wrought iron gates were already visible, illuminated by the soft light of lanterns. Security, cameras, men in black. Alex leaned a little closer. "The rules are simple," he said quietly but very clearly. "Stay close to me. Don't move a step without my signal. Smile naturally, calmly, without unnecessary warmth. If someone asks a question, answer briefly, 1 or 2 sentences, and then immediately turn the conversation to them. These people love to talk about themselves, their deals, their yachts, their victories. Give them this opportunity and they will love you. If I put my hand on your waist, don't pull away, but don't press in either. It should seem natural, like the familiar gesture of a married couple who have been together for a long time. No theatrics. If you sense even the slightest danger, physical, psychological, anything, squeeze my hand firmly twice in a row. I'll know instantly." Natasha looked him in the eye. "And what will happen to Sergei?" Alex paused. "Today you'll simply play a role. Everything else will happen tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, when he himself won't understand where the blow came from." The limousine door opened. The cool night air smelled of pine and money. Alex stepped out first, stood up straight, and adjusted the cuffs of his jacket with one precise movement. Then he turned and extended his hand, an open palm, warm, dry, confident. This time, Natasha didn't hesitate for a second. She placed her hand, still trembling from the cold and nerves she'd endured, in his. His fingers closed softly around it, and for some reason, that touch gave her more strength than all the hot tea and the warm interior of the limousine combined. They walked along the illuminated path, wide, paved with light gray natural stone, with low lanterns burning on either side, casting long shadows. Ahead loomed the mansion, a modern fortress of glass, concrete, and steel. The enormous floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with a soft interior light. Silhouettes in evening attire moved behind them. Black tuxedos, long dresses, flashes of jewelry. It all looked like a scene from a movie, only too real, too cold and dangerous. Just before the steps, Alex quietly, just for her, said, "Remember, you're not a victim, you're a weapon." Natasha straightened her back, lifted her chin. She stepped inside. The hall was enormous and didn't look ostentatiously chic, but filled with the restrained, cool luxury of people who no longer needed to prove anything. Dark wood, the subdued light of crystal chandeliers, enormous floor-to-ceiling windows, beyond which the forest loomed black. The guests conversed in hushed tones, almost whispers, as if afraid to frighten their own well-being. Alexander delicately held Natasha's elbow, the touch light, barely perceptible. She felt the warmth of his skin through the fabric of his jacket, and it was surprisingly calming, creating the feeling that he was her reliable shield. The first to approach them was a short man of about 50, with graying hair at his temples and a piercing gaze. Natasha immediately recognized him from photographs in business publications. It was Oleg Vadimovich Ratnikov, one of the men who controlled half the construction market in the Moscow region. Alexander Ratnikov extended his hand, but his gaze was directed at Natasha. "I didn't expect you to get married after all. Quite fortunately," he said. Alexander smiled that signature smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Natasha, meet Oleg Vadimovich, one of the few people who knows how to properly erect buildings and how to tear them down." Natasha responded with a slight nod, her smile warm enough not to seem cold. "Very nice. Alexander told me a lot about you." The lie rolled off her lips easily, which surprised her. Ratnikov narrowed his eyes. "And what did he tell me about me?" "That you always pay your debts, even if you have to pay twice," Natasha replied. There was a short pause. Then Ratnikov laughed, short, dry, but sincere. "You have a dangerous wife, Sasha." "I know," Alexander replied calmly. "That's why I chose her." They walked away. Natasha felt a slight shiver run down her spine, the remnants of adrenaline. It was like a game of poker where the stakes were much higher than the chips. The next hour and a half passed in a blur. Glasses of champagne, which she barely drank, smiles, the barely noticeable touch of Alexander's hand on her waist at the right moments. She uttered brief phrases precisely when necessary. Now she'd slip in a witty, almost imperceptible remark that would make her interlocutor pause for a moment, smiling. Now, with a gentle turn of her head and a clarifying question, she'd steer the conversation back to a safer direction. She was playing a role, and damn, she played it superbly, so well that she began to believe in the illusion herself. At some point, she caught her reflection in the enormous mirror on the wall. A tall woman in a dark emerald dress, with an upright posture, a confident smile, and eyes that no longer held tears. It was she, or was already becoming her. Suddenly, Alexander leaned toward her ear. "See that man by the fireplace in the dark blue suit? He's been staring at us for about 10 minutes. Natasha slowly turned her head. Yes, he was staring, and his gaze was painfully familiar. Her heart sank painfully. Sergei, in an expensive, unfamiliar suit, holding a glass in his hand, with an expression of confusion and anger on his face. "He's here," she whispered. "Of course," Alexander replied calmly, as if they were discussing the weather. "This is his evening, his grand deal, his desperate attempt to enter this circle, the circle of those who decide the fates of billions. Only he doesn't yet realize that the circle has already closed, and he is not a guest inside, but prey." Alexander took 2 glasses from a passing waiter and handed one to Natasha. "Drink. You will need a steady hand." Natasha took a sip. The champagne was ice cold. Sergei finally mustered up his courage, pushed himself away from the fireplace, and crossed the room toward them, trying to appear confident, striding long and squaring his shoulders. But Natasha saw everything. The tense muscles of his neck, the overly abrupt movements of his hands, the forced smile that was more like a snarl. He was extremely nervous, but only she, the one who had lived with him for years and knew his every weakness, could see it. "You are on the Life and History channel. Thank you for watching." When he was close enough to be heard, he began, "Natasha." His voice wavered on the first syllable. "What are you doing?" Alexander turned slowly, as if he had just noticed him. "Sergei Kovalev." "Right?" His voice was calm, almost friendly. "We haven't been introduced. Alexander Vetrov." Sergei froze. The name was clearly familiar to him. Very familiar. "Are you that Vetrov?" "The same one." Alexander nodded. "And this is my wife, Natasha." Sergei looked at her. His eyes were a mixture of rage, incomprehension, and something else. Fear. "What are you doing here with him?" Natasha felt a wave rise inside, not fear, not resentment, but anger, cold and desperate. She smiled the same smile she'd been practicing all evening. I'm here because I wanted to. And you, Seryozha, it seems you've come to ask for money from people who don't like being blackmailed with their children. Sergei turned pale. Alexander continued, keeping his voice low. Tomorrow morning, your accounts will be frozen until the circumstances are clarified, because this week the prosecutor's office received a very interesting set of documents about your business. How you withdrew money through shell companies, how you abused your official position at the bank, and how you threatened to deprive your wife of parental rights if she dared to leave. Everything is recorded. Everything is confirmed. Everything is legal. Sergei opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You can't. I already can, Alexander said quietly, and I already have. Natasha approached Sergei. For the first time in many years, she was not afraid to look him in the eye. You will never see Misha again without my permission, never. And if you try, you'll be in jail for a long time. She turned to Alexander. I want to go home. Alexander nodded. Of course, my dear. They headed for the exit. Sergei remained standing in the middle of the room, a lonely figure in an expensive suit that was now worthless. In the limousine, Natasha finally allowed herself to exhale. The trembling returned, but this time it was a trembling of relief. Alexander poured her some cognac, real, old. You were magnificent. I was scared to death, she admitted. I know, he replied, and still I did everything right. He paused. And now let's talk about my promise. I have a small apartment for you in the city. The title deeds in your name will be here tomorrow. The invoice with the initial amount, too. Then there are lawyers, court, divorce, and custody. Everything is arranged. You will only have to be a mother. Natasha looked at him for a long time. Why are you doing this? Alexander turned to the window. I once had a sister. Her husband also liked to keep the child on a short leash. Then my sister disappeared. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, no one ever found the body. He turned back. I don't save everyone, but when I see a similar situation, I intervene. Natasha finished her cognac and put the glass down. Thank you. You're welcome. You saved yourself today. I only provided you with the stage. The car stopped at the entrance to an old but beautiful house on Patriarch's Ponds. Alexander got out and opened the door for her. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning, people with documents will arrive. Now go to bed. You deserve it. Natasha went out. The rain had already stopped. The sky was clear and starry. She looked at Alexander. We'll see each other again. He smiled genuinely for the first time. If you want, but now it's your decision. She nodded, turned, and walked to the door. A light was on in the nursery window on the ground floor. The nanny Alexander had hired earlier in the day had already brought Misha here. Alexander told Natasha about this on the way. She opened the door and for the first time in many years walked home, into her own home, where her son was waiting for her, and where no one would ever keep her chained up again.